everybody to Making Up. I think today I'll be sharing my story about like how did we start from a 17 people org where we got kind of acquired, like more of an acqui-hired per se, and how did we try to influence 4,000 plus engineering org. And one of the tasks that was given to us was a digitally transform it. And to give a little bit of a background, I was a founding engineer for a bank in Southeast Asia. Uh, so worked on that startup culture for a while, almost 3.5 years, scale it up to millions of customers. Before that was worked sometime with McKinsey as a tech consultant as well. We used to do a lot of this bot and digital transformations, but we are more of an external consultants rather than internals, right? So this specific instance, we joined this 4,000 plus hog with 17 people in one city per se, and with the problem that was given to us, what did we do? What are the failures that we went through? What were those things? Some of those learnings we had which actually worked, and some of those stuff which actually didn't work, and some of the mental models which can be shared, which uh, can be more of a universal at some point or even kind of subjective, depending upon the situation per se, right? So yeah, let's jump on. So yeah, when we joined, most of us didn't want us there. Like, yeah, the questions came in like, why is this team even there? Why did they join? Or what is their purpose? What will be they owning? Which part of the team they'll be starting to work on? And bunch of those things. And traditionally, this specific cog, which has been there for like 30 years, was much more layered architecture in the sense there was a front-end team, there was a gateway team, even within front-end team, there were layers between them. There's a back-end team and platform and bunch of other things. It's like very much everybody's working in their own boundaries per se. There's nothing like end to end. Like if you have to make a database change, you have to talk to a DBA per se. So it's very much horizontally what's sliced in terms of the work. And bunch of us like we love to work on end to end, own things, break things, take accountable, ship things to production much more faster and whatnot. And working on a very small layer is kind of boring for the most of the folks that who started there. So that was a context, and people when we started, like most of them were not that happy that like we got kind of acquired per se, right? So just to set what exactly I'm just giving a one glimpse of the problem. Uh, to get a simple cloud blob storage in S3 bucket in AWS, doing the automation layer in infrastructure as code in Terraform and whatnot just took 30 minutes, but getting the approval to put it, use it, took like almost like 13 days. That's the scale of what do you call the slowness per se that the team was operating with, because there are multiple teams involved and whatnot. And before we joined, the before we got this problem statement, one of the stakeholders was mentioning that to make a logo change in one of our apps, it took 6 months. I mean, seems to be a very small change, but it involved many people across the chain of org to make that happen in a simple logo change. Seems to be super trivial per se, right? So that's the problem, the scale that we're dealing with, and that's how we started. And when we started, yeah, the normal instinct that kicks in, like, why is this architecture so slow? Why is there so many approval chains? Why is the deployment process done in this specific way? Why the legacy code has been laying there for such a long time? Why there are no test cases? I mean, these are the questions that pops up, and we started shooting, right? So uh, we thought like, yeah, we know it all, and these guys don't know, and yeah, it's our job to ask these questions, and that's how we were. But what the rest of the Hawk saw was that like these outsiders are coming and they're just questioning. It's like I'm going to somebody's house and questioning why did they get that furniture. I mean, right? So that's how bad or good per se it was. I mean, we'll talk about the good parts soon, right? So from their perspective, when took a step back, the decision that was made at, at that time with the constraint that they had totally made sense. Um, but that's something we took quite a lot of time to realize. And the whole rest of the team saw that, like, oh, these are a bunch of arrogant folks who are just like coming in and like asking a bunch of questions, right? So that was a problem. So we had a choice, right? So what do we do? This was the mood, or this was the scene when we got in, when we started learning about a bunch of systems. So what could we do? So one thing was very clear. So if we keep on doing that, like, and we don't even own the servers, uh, we have open a problem of digital transformation. We don't own a specific service per se. There were a lot of other reasons why we couldn't pick up a small problem and start over as well. So with these problems out there, or constraints out there, we just try to draw like what is a circle of influence and circle of control. Though we wanted to influence a lot of things, we couldn't, right? Because we don't own that. We are not accountable. These teams have been running the systems for such a long time. And for the small pieces that we picked on, so we started with we practicing those so-called best practices, or not creating more tech debt, or not creating more problems, or doing with a much more so-called industry best practices, following request for comments to align with asynchronously with people, recording our architectural decisions with ADRs, or documenting things, writing test cases where it was not there, right? So automating anything manual which we come across, at least people couldn't say no to that, right? So in the small piece of work that we'll be doing. So that's where we started it off, and yeah, we'll talk about like how things got on. So with those initial small things, we again we got a very small success, and we thought like, okay, let's do something big. One of the problems in the org that we saw was that like, how do I know which service is owned by whom? Who are those people? Where do I get their API documentations? How do I interface with them? Where do they sit in the office in the other city and whatnot? These were all, nothing was documented. It's everybody, it was there in their head. It was all working through relationships. And we are outsiders. So we thought like there was this IDP tool back then, I think almost like 3.5 years now, open source by Spotify, called Backstage. The main problem it solves is cataloging of the products, services owned by different teams. And we thought, okay, we'll bring that and we'll try to integrate or catalog all the services, who's owning it, where are the logs for it, which repository. We'll put all of those, and it's a very good catalog, and people can self-serve and answer these. But nothing happened. Though we proposed this in our architectural forums, which we kind of started, yeah, people on the call said, yeah, this sounds exciting and it should be there, but adoption was literally zero. Nobody wanted to catalog their own service. We ended up with multiple other issues where we couldn't even deploy this particular Backstage in our on-prem, because it needed something called three-letter code, a virtual machine, and a database. And the way the workflow was there is that like you need specific these things to be filled, only you get a VM. And we didn't even know what to fill there. It was completely ambiguous, or we're not putting something into production. It's an internal application. So that's what's how bad it was. This was the major bottleneck, or a major failure, that the first super bad failure we saw, where literally something which was supposed to be good, we assumed that it should have been bubbled up and people would love this, totally failed. And though everybody agreed that this is needed, cataloging is kind of needed. So we couldn't catalog. Let's talk about the second biggest problem that we came across. So we were asked that like, okay, can you, by the CPTO, can you look at the specific deployment pipeline or process, which takes like almost 1.5 months for every release to go? Why is it taking so much time? And some of us got in, and we were identify a lot of problems, and we were start questioning why are we not solving these and whatnot. Um, so And this was all remote per se. And we were in one city, the team was sitting in other cities, and some of them also distributed across geographies. And they didn't see the way that we saw. They saw it more like they're questioning too much of how we do things, and relationship kind of like totally struggled. So we did a lot of mistakes. We have to admit that, right? So, and recovering from that, so we started with zero trust. I mean, we didn't have trust to build with, but we went into negative on the relationship score between that team and our team. And that took literally 6 months to build it up over small things that we had to do. Right. So now we'll jump on one opportunity we got, more like a turning point. Right. So this came as a blessing as a disguise, where we had a budget problem or a hiring freeze in one of our jurisdictions in Brazil, and we couldn't hire the translators for Portuguese Brazil. And with that, the CPTO gave a problem that can we build something with auto translations using AI? This was almost like 2.5 years per se. Um, and this was like, since it came directly from CPTO, it had the highest visibility. And people were asked to volunteer. And of course, we also did. And we literally worked with 8 different teams to get it done. And this was a major breakthrough. And in this specific project, we didn't have a PM, there was no extensive planning done, or there was no Scrum Master helping it out, just bunch of volunteers from different teams to get it done. And we got it done, and in more than expected time, with Google Vertex AI, where I think as of now we translate more than 16 languages with Google Vertex AI, and rack systems built like 2.5 years back. And whatever we built around us, we made sure it is industry standard. We wrote first time in structure as code in GCP per se. And whatever we did, be the observability stack, how do we did the rota, how do we do the incident management, everything was mostly like we didn't invent anything new, but we picked up what is industry standard rather than taking up what's already happening in the hog. That kind of put us in a spotlight. Oh, these guys are know what they're doing per se. That really helped us to move a lot of things much better, right? So now what really happened here? Let's talk about the collaboration aspect since it came from CPTO, right? So if I have to just, yeah, I think before I talk about the collaboration itself, and every team, and we thought at some point that why is the team as a problem? We looked at the DX surveys that sent out to each devs every like a month or so on their health. What do they feel about it? Within the team, everybody feels good. The scores are super high. But the problem is around the boundaries where people are not happy always with our other teams. Is it because of empathy lacking, or there is always a misalignment with goals and whatnot? Multiple things. But one pattern we clearly saw was that like everything was super good within a team. That applies to most of the teams. But when we talk about like how do you want to rate the other team, what do you feel about the other team, there is always complaints, right? So that's where the frictions was, and this pattern was not just like with few teams, but like most of the teams that we were working with, because there was a layer by layer by layer um, uh, division or org structure per se. And we'll talk about org structure. Why couldn't we do something with org structure? I mean, that's a bigger problem. I think we're not talking about that now, right? So with this being the problem, let's touch a bit on the collaboration aspects, right? So yeah, just to the internal health was super good, but the system health as a whole, as the org level, wasn't that great for sure, because things were moving small. It was like everything was optimized at locally, but not at the globally, right? So simple thing, we just try to understand like why is this happening? The Prisma dilemma problem, right? So if team A wants to collaborate with team B, both will be winning. But team A does not trust team B that they will do the same. So it's always lose-lose kind of a situation. To give a simple example, if team A is working on a feature which is kind of dependent on team B, and team B has their own goals and OKRs per se, whatnot, they are not incentivized to help them. They are looking at their own key results or goals and objectives, and they are trying to aim them. But at the heart level, if they try to see, if they try to collaborate each other and try to do um, get stuff done, then they're gonna be paying off much more better. But because of the trust issues, the boundary or the friction between the teams, always it's an assumption that, oh, team A wouldn't cooperate, so let me optimize only for my own goals, or other way around, vice versa for the other team. And with this, it was a very clear pattern that our goals are like very much locally optimized and not globally optimized per se. And and by default, the dominant strategy was not to pay off, right? So yeah, with this being the problem, so we started with doing tiny things. We, instead of questioning, we thought like we will ask the question still, not to question like why the decision was made, but to understand those constraints in a much more humble way and try to spend more time with those teams to understand the constraints and the problem rather than to question their own decisions. Uh, and helping them going with open hands that like, okay, can I write test cases for this for your service which does not have? Can I automate a bunch of things which are done manually today so that your life becomes much more easier, right? So because they have a lot of other deliverables and they're not able to give time, so can we help you, right? So and whenever these teams helps, how do we make sure that that appreciation comes along and it's made public so that they feel good about what they did, and kind of though they're not directly incentivized to help us, at least putting up in an open forum in a simple Slack chat, Slack group channel per se will help, will make them feel good about themselves. And these are tiny things that we try to influence. We also propose like, can we have shared OKRs, which actually never went off, and I was still struggling to get that. Right. So these are some tiny things which actually started making some differences over a long time. Right. So, and why did it take so long? So um, right. So it's today, if you have to talk about from where we started, where we didn't own any specific service, to today we own multiple services or maintainers or collaborators with other services. It took almost like 3.5 years per se, right? So all the way we started from not having access to even a code base, even with the read access, to owning a specific service. It These are tiny things that helped. So this is the high level overview of like the journey itself. I mean, I didn't cover fully per se, but these are some of the things that went in. Now let's talk about like why did this happen? What were those learnings? So it's more of like a diagnosis of what has gone wrong. So why did it take so long per se? And as I told earlier, this team, some of the members were, I think they started from college to being there in the firm for like 20 years, 25 years, 15 years. I mean, that's immense proof of loyalty to a company. Amazing thing. But one side effect of that was that like whatever the pain or the so-called non-best practices became more like a norm, and the pain became the norm in the sense it's like this is how it is, and there's nothing wrong or nothing to be changed, is the kind of feeling that we could experience. It's some, I mean, I don't know what's the right way to label this, but that's how the environment was. Yeah. So what did actually work, right? So today, if you have to look at from where we started with not having access to where we are standing today, is more of like where environments were managed, where every QA team fills up an Excel sheet to block their environments, to anybody can spin up their own environments today, to deploying every 1.5 months, 2 months, to deploying every or releasing every 10 days. It's still not that great, but still quite a huge difference. And nobody sharing what other team is building or aligning on with their architectural diagrams or architectural decisions. that RFC to ADR process per se, or writing test cases, that feeling that like we write test cases to feel confident on what we are putting into production. That's a huge difference that we try to achieve. But yeah, that came with a lot of things, right? So um, now this was the real impact where we talked about it backstage, and the 13 days we took time to get an S3 bucket. Now I think with automation that was done, it just takes less than 4 minutes. So what did we do to make this happen, right? So we try to solve their cross-cutting concerns per se. Um, they are focusing on their features and whatnot. We are trying to focus on how can we make their life better, the dev experience or a PM experience, their pain points of manual work, the error rates reduction and whatnot. And that was a major thing. And once we automated or built so-called the platform engineering team or the mindset per se, and people can reuse all of this and everybody don't have to build on their own, these things made a huge difference. Um, and moving stuff. And there's the backstage stuff, right? So, and we still had a lot of failures, right? It's not like everything we did was a super success. Still, there are a lot of failures, and it's more of like you pick up 100 things and yeah, maybe 10, 20, 30. That's a max that sees the light of the day. But it's a lot of still moving the needle. So going back to we started with digital transformation, but being within a company where you don't have a direct influence for some reasons, where you cannot like dictate on what can be done, and it's more of like you have to show the good work, build the relationship, trust, and then you move things forward. And that's definitely took quite a lot of time, right? So and there's the failure, same patterns, and it took us like 3.5 years to understand like why this is happening, right? So yeah, I think this were the learnings that we had kind of starts, right? We think the entire org is a system and the relationships and the people around it. And when we started this, I mean, there are multiple moving parts to this. There are goals, everybody has a deliverable, there are people, a behavior associated with that. They have their own incentives that's being put up. So how these are all interlinked, right? So when we started, at least this was my learning, where I thought like, okay, people were the problem. I'm like, oh, these people are not receptive. They are not that great. They are stuck to their own stuff. These are the very initial thoughts that came in. Then I'm like, okay, people are not. I mean, they're not so bad. Like, yeah, they're just frustrated with a lot of things that's already burning in their own plate. So they're not able to give my time if they're not responding to me and they're not collaborative, whatnot. Okay, then I'm like, okay, it's a mindset problem. It has been there for a long time. But the real aha moment was like, it's not the people problem, it's not the mindset, it's the system problem. I mean, think about this, right? So you have a football team. I think some of you would have read the Thinking in Systems book. Same example, right? If you want to have a basketball team from a football team, if you replace each members from the team one by one in a staggered manner, you still have a left football team. It's not about the people; it's about the game rules, the interactions, and that was a major learning from all the way to seeing people itself as a problem to seeing it as a system, and people are never the problem. It's just that the system that's been tied to on the interactions, the feedback loops, and whatnot. Right. Yeah. So today, if I have to get into these kind of problems, what do I do, right? So this, I mean, there's a very, I mean, nobody can remember this playbook, and it's very subjective as well, and it can be for everybody, it can be different things. But one thing that stands out is that like instead of asking questions, whenever I get into a new team, I start with like, how can I help, or what is your biggest problem? Let's start from that. Let's understand. Let's sit out. Um, so being more of a listener rather than like starting to give suggestions and whatnot, because they know they also know the suggestions themselves. So it's not something a rocket science that we are kind of trying to build, right? So that really kind of helped, and also bringing people in open, crediting their giving them credits wherever it's needed. and incentivizing even a tiny bits, as we talked about in the initial um, slides, that move needles per se, right? So it's more of like how do we like like the way over a period you put money in a bank and it eventually like the interest grows if you don't take out like the compound interest stuff. The relationships also compound over a period of time. I mean, it need not be always a function of time. It also is a function of the problems you solve together, right? And that was super helpful. Right. So, and removing ourselves from second person or a first person perspective to a third person perspective, where not judging people per se, but judging the systems and the constraints and the situational problems that it went with, for whatever reason, regulatory reasons, tech reasons, time reasons, not sure, right? So understanding these things and empathizing with people and playing by strengths and not expecting everything from anybody really helps. And this is where I think I'm going to talk about. I have this mental model, and the third one is the most important one, where I think Stephen Covey talks about emotional bank account, where you, before you take off something from somebody, like you should start depositing uh, tiny bits of emotional stuff on somebody else's plate. So you build a relationship before you start asking. So give before you ask, or care before you ask, kind of a thing. That really helps. Might not be 100% with everybody, but I think most of the people are good. They want to help, and they are receptive. If you help, they'll reciprocate for sure. And these are simple things that we all know, and we just have to take a step back whenever we see these problems to what is that best thing that we could do, right? So the deposits, this is the main most important thing that I think I will focus on if I have to pick just one stuff, right? So and it's all about like figuring out like which one team want to get into that discomfort zone and start playing around, helping people, going out of their usual boundaries to help others. That finding that team, and that's something we had with the 17 members because we were worked together in a previous startup and we knew each other's strengths and vulnerabilities, and we each other know, okay, this person can do this better, and he or she might need help in these different scenarios, and this person would be better for that. So building that up and the willingness to move, solve problems, and feeling that this is one problem and not sure what, not optimizing locally but global maxima. I think that mindset kind of really helps, right? And the first one is all about like, it's again to stress out. It's people are not the problem. The mindset is not the problem. It's just that interactions and the feedback loop. So we have to change the game rules to move things. We can do multiple things out there. We change the org design, or how people work. We make them sit together or make the shared goal. We can do a bunch of stuff. But yeah, it's very situational. What works where, kind of a thing. Um, yeah. Yeah, just stressing on the. I think we couldn't have achieved this and would have got super frustrated if we didn't have that our core team, which we started initially 17, where we could like share our frustrations and build on each other's strengths, and bring in people for right problems whenever it's needed, keeping our egos aside and the willingness to move and start. I mean, not stop. Giving up, kind of a thing. That's, I think that willingness is the most important stuff, and that one small team which can make a difference. And that building that initial cohort of people, I think we started with that with 17 people and it kind of worked. So kind of lucky on that aspect, right? So I think we started our slide with this, right? Most of them wouldn't didn't want us there when we joined, and today it's kind of like kind of opposite. I'm glad to say that like a lot of teams love to work with us and they don't want to leave. And when we are trying to move on to next project, uh, they want us to stick around. They want to move with us in other projects and all that stuff. That's super encouraging, and fulfilling, to be honest. And this is one of the anecdotal stuff one of the engineers mentioned, where since they were working in a very layered by layered approach and working on one thing, they were kind of like even kind of not that confident, or the self-esteem was super low on, even if they have to make a switch because they've been in the firm for like 15, 20 years, do their skills actually matter now? They know the very good domain knowledge, but do they understand the tech and other aspects which the world has moved on to? And they are super thankful that like we could expose them into that end-to-end uh, delivery cycles where they could touch all the way from front end to all the way to infrastructure. Um, yeah, and that's super fulfilling when somebody comes and talks about that, right? Yeah, that's pretty much I had, folks. Try to chunk it down with less stuff, not to bore you guys. If you have any questions, I'm so good to take it down. Take it now.